So I'm talking about building Obsidian plugins, which I believe is the key to personalizing your PKM system. If you don't know, PKM just stands for Personal Knowledge Management System, and Obsidian is a note-taking app that works on mostly markdown. It's an Electron app, so you have the ability to build out plugins using Typescript. They have a pretty good API, and so we're going to dig into that. If you want to find out more about me, you can find info at my personal blog, which is there, and then also Nick and I have a site we just launched called Dev Dilemmas for our consulting company that we started end of last year. So we're open to look at helping people out, mostly kind of doing fractional CTO stuff or even hands-on keyboard stuff. So, right. Why is it doing that? Okay, I'm moving it too much?
No, it's not you.
Okay. All right. So tonight we'll go over kind of how to build a plugin, as I said, and we're going to build a plugin that I called Obsidian Distiller plugin. It's essentially a plugin where you can point it at a note, either via a file context menu or a command palette command, and it will pull out the highlights out of a section of the note that we configure, and then send that information off to an LLM with a prompt that we configure, and then it will write out whatever the LLM's response is for summarizing that note in a section of the document that we configure. Some of the resources I used for this, one, I have a Obsidian plugin called Clipper that I've been developing for the last year and a half or so, and you can also check out the docs.obsidian.md site. That is a pretty amazing site that's relatively new. It's been there for about a month or two. No, probably a little bit longer than that. But it does a really good job of kind of breaking down how to build a plugin and some of the things you need to look out for, as well as the Obsidian API documentation, which is really just their types in GitHub. And then I want to call out this quick add plugin, mostly because I stole their AI API code from there. So stealing is all open source, right? But I went in there and looked at how they were calling the API and used that. All right, so step one, we're going to set the plugin, and we're going to do that using a template repo that Obsidian provides. We will then create a test vault to link to our plugin and link to our plugin code, so that way we can test the plugin. You want to create a test vault because there's always an opportunity for data loss. So I've never lost data, but that means I'm lucky. So yeah, you definitely probably want to test on a test vault when you're doing this. And then in step one, we'll just verify that we can build everything and we can see that sample plugin in our code. Yes?
So I haven't used Obsidian before.
Yep.
So some terms, when you say a vault, is that
sure.
Like where your notes and stuff are stored?
Yeah, so it has a vault would be, yes, this is where your notes are stored. You can have multiple vaults. So they are all markdown. They do have a canvas, a new thing where it's a canvas, which is not markdown, but most of it is just markdown files. You can put PDF in there as well. They have a really good PDF viewer, but their terminology for vault is this is where these notes go. Yeah, notebook would be a kind of a synonym for that.
For those of us that are Enterprise OneNote users,
yeah, yeah. And then in step two, so we're gonna add Svelte to this project to maintain, kind of build out our UI. And in this case, we'll go through adding that dependency and then we'll convert the settings to use Svelte. I personally like doing this because one, I like writing declarative HTML rather than programmatic DOM building, etc. They also have a really nice store that you can bind your settings to, so that way you just change the setting and behind the scenes it stores it and saves it. Now, that being said, depending on the complexity of what you're doing, you may not, nowadays you may not want to pull in Svelte for this because Obsidian's actually adding a lot of nice component UI things that you could make use of, and that you won't be able to use those with Svelte. You'll have to kind of build your own. So like I built my own auto suggest tool in my other plugin. They have a nice one now that I could have just used, and it would have been nice to use that. Theirs is just the DOM, so it may actually be whatever Electron exposes, I'm not sure, but it's essentially like create EL. It's all programmatic in the sense of that you're just building it out via JavaScript or TypeScript. For step 3, we will go through and add the settings that we need for this plugin. And then we will also put in the skeletons for the command palette command and the file context menu command. And then we will also go ahead and read the note and see if we are reading our settings properly, so that way we can see we found the highlights header, we pulled out the highlights, and we'll show a modal with the highlights that we captured. And then step 4 is kind of taking all that and wrapping it up. We'll take those highlights, we'll send them to OpenAI, we'll get the response back, and then we'll write that response to the header that we configured in the same note. We'll do this in 2 different ways. So when we're in the and this will make a lot more sense as I can just bring up Obsidian real quick and show you. So so this here. Sorry, where's my, it's not, there we go. So this is a note, and in this case, I'm in edit mode. I could go in there and type. There's 2 modes that it can have. This is a read mode, can't type. It's hard to tell with this note because there's not much in there. But in this case, it's in read mode. Go back to, this is in edit mode. So in the case that we are going to build, if we are in edit mode and we open the command palette, we'll be able to find a command in there that says, I want to run this command because I'm in edit mode. And then the other one will be, we'll add a context to this, or we'll add a menu item to this file context menu to say, hey, distill this note. So in this case, we don't know that we may or may not have the note open in an editor. So in that case, we're just really doing file edits to a file on the file system. We are using Obsidian's API to do that, but we're really just changing a file on the file system. In the editor side, where we know we're in the context of an editor, we'll use editor commands to say, no, grab this data and then plug this data into that editor. So that'll be the difference. All right, so for step 1, really all it is you do a git clone of the Obsidian sample plugin to whatever it is you want to call. In this case, it's Obsidian Distiller. CD into that directory, and then run a npm install. You could do npm install if you want. I prefer to do npm. And then we're going to create a test vault. So in my case, I've already created a test vault. The way you create vaults is this little GUI here, which opened on this window, but I'll bring it over. We'll come here. In this case, it is going to ask me to create a vault, but I've already created one. In this case, we're going to call it distiller test. You're going to select where you want to save it, and then the vault will be created. And in this case, I've also went ahead and drug in some books. So I have a folder of some books. So this is essentially in my personal vault. I use a tool called Readwise. Whenever I read a book on my Kindle, make highlights. They read the highlights out, and then they essentially every day they give me like 10 or so to review, and they also sync all the highlights to a note in your Obsidian vault. In this case, and you can change this template, but in this case, I have all the highlights going under a highlights header. In this case, this is just a level 2 markdown header. So this is the type of note that we want to kind of have this LLM distill for us. And in this case, I've actually already have it, and it's done it twice. I thought I'd clean those up, but I didn't, so I'm going to go ahead and delete these because we'll want it to do it again. Yeah, but this is essentially what an Obsidian vault looks like with some files. So first thing we're going to want to do is when you create a new vault, you can't actually install any community plugins or anything that you've built. They kind of have it set to where it's a setting that kind of protects people from potential third-party things that they don't have full control over. But we're going to turn the ability on to install community plugins. I'm going to install a plugin from the community store called Brat. That stands for, what does that stand for? I can't do it. Don't do that. That stands for Beta Reviewers Auto Update Tester. Essentially what it does is it allows you to go, here's a Git repo, please install that plugin for me. Because there are a handful of plugins that will never be able to go into the community plugin store because either they have no dependencies, so any plugin that you build, you can have no dependencies if you say my plugin only works on the desktop. That may or may not actually be true. Generally, if you have a node dependency, they're not going to allow you to deploy that because at the end of the day, your plugin compiles down to a main.js, a styles.css, and a manifest.json file. And they don't expect the installer to have any other dependencies. I'll show you via Brat how to install a plugin that's only a Git repo called Hot Reload that allows us to, it'll just reload the plugin behind the scenes as you're developing and saving. So I'll go ahead and do that now. So there's a gear icon down here where we can go into settings, and in the settings section, there's a community plugin section. In this case, they're just kind of giving you some information that they want you to read before you turn it on. Hey, just know they're kind of just telling you, hey, be aware that you're installing a third-party software that is not fully controlled by the Obsidian team. All right, so now we have community plugins turned on. We can go to this browse, and in this case, I want to look for Brat. Oh, I need actually, you know what I didn't do? I didn't connect to a network. Do you know what the Wi-Fi is, Nick? Improving student. Just okay. Did it not connect? It is connected. What's going on? There we go. Okay, so we're going to look for the Brat program. Click on that. In this case, we're going to install it. We're going to enable it. And then we're going to go to options. This is where you can configure a plugin if it has settings. Our plugin will have settings, so ours will show up there eventually as well. So in this case, I want to add a beta plugin. So I'm going to add that. And then what I'm going to do is go back to my slides. I'm going to copy this link here. Copy link. Okay. Paste that in. All right, so that's the hot reloads Git repo. Going to add plugin. All right, so that plugin is now available. And if I go to community plugins, I can see that it's installed and turned on or enabled. Okay. All right, so we took care of that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to symlink our plugin code that we did the git clone of before. I didn't go through that step. I've already done it, but I will show you. So in this case, right now I'm in my vault, and there is a .obsidian directory in that vault, and under that there's a plugins directory. And if we look under there, I can see that these are the two plugins that I've already installed, Hot Reload and Obsidian 42 Brat. Okay. What we want to do is I have this step one of our code that we've already done. Now, I'm going to show you a kind of a slightly convoluted way of setting up symlinks. But the reason why I'm doing this is because if you ever get into Obsidian and you pay for their sync service to where you're syncing things, and you have that set up on your vaults, if I just symlinked into the development directory they have, it's going to start syncing all our node modules. And if it does that, that's like a black hole, right? Like, I don't know what would happen. I mean, I know what happens. It just takes a long time and it uses up your data. But so what we want to do is we really want to just, sorry, where I'm at, right here. What we really want to do is have a separate directory where all we're going to do is put in the 3 files that I talked about that Obsidian cares about, and then have that be the place we're linked to. So in this case, I'm gonna run the link command on this. Okay, so step 1, and actually I need to go here. So plugins. Huh? Can I increase the font size? Yeah. Sorry, it looks gigantic to me, but I'm right next to it, I guess. Oh, wait. Is that better? Okay. All right, so now I'm going to link symbolic, that to this directory. In that case, now we will have, we not have anything because why do we not? Oh yeah, there it is. So now we have an Obsidian Distiller directory that we've linked to. Okay, so we've got our links set up, and now I'm going to go ahead and go to the code and run a build on it. So in this case, I'll go up here and I'm going to run a PNPM run build. So that's going to compile the TS, write out do the production build, and it should have copied the files over, but for some reason it looks like it didn't, which is a little surprising. Okay, so it didn't write out the files, so let me look at why it didn't write out the files. Because I'm not telling it to write out the files. I mean, Nick said, oh my gosh. What happened? I'm sorry. Nick sat there and watched me slave over this today, and something I did is gone. Good grief. Isn't that how it always works? So let me, nope, don't do that. All right. So let's see if it happened here as well. It didn't happen here, so not sure what happened, but we're gonna take this whole line. We're gonna take this here. So copy that, go back over here, add it there, save it. It's gonna cry because I don't have a comma. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, and then got that. So the build here, I want to go over here and run can't type. Wow. Every one that I need. PNPM run copy. Save that. All right. Save it. Build. Step 1, PNPM run build. Okay, so now it did the copy. You can see it right here. It copied it over. If I go to the plugin linked, all our files should be there. Great, our files are there. So now if I open up Obsidian, if I go to our settings, community plugins. Now, so since this is the first time that we just installed that, now I have to actually hit that to get it to say, hey, there's a directory there. We have our sample plugin. We're going to turn it on. And then I'm going to go over and show you just some of the UI elements that it's created for us. So one, it added this little dice. If you click it, it shows you a notice over there in the top right corner. And then the other UI element that it adds is actually, I can show you, there will be some commands in here now. So sample plugin. sample editor command, that editor command is showing up because I'm in edit mode on a markdown document. If I run that, I don't think it does anything. But if, let's say if I go out of, it just wrote out sample editor command. If I go out of edit mode, so I'm not in edit mode right now, I can't type and do anything. If I run sample, there's only going to be 2 of them now because now I'm not in an editor. But there's a couple more here where it's just like it's going to open a modal for us. All right. So let's look at the code behind this.
This is all just from that template project?
This is all from that template project, yep. Actually, no, let's not look at node modules. This is the other thing I can't figure out is why this node modules aren't hidden in this one. It's very weird, but whatever. That's more, I know why it is, because I have a very weird directory name, and it's some kind of issue with either the NeoVim plugin or Git. Okay, so this is the starting, essentially, TypeScript class that they give you to work with. We have some imports, as expected. We have an interface for what our settings are going to look like. In this case, we have, and that's one thing I didn't show you. Let me show you that real quick. We have a setting for this plugin, the sample plugin, and this is our setting. Setting number 1, it's a secret, and it's default. So very, very interesting things there. But there's the data behind that setting. It's literally called my setting. It's going to be a string. What's the default going to be? We're going to set it to default. So then when we essentially when we build out this plugin class, we're going to extend the Obsidian plugin. We're going to set our settings to that the interface of my plugin settings, and then we have a couple of methods here. One is the onload. So what does this plugin need to do when we load? Well, it needs to load the settings because behind the scenes it'll essentially store a data.json file in your plugin directory, and it'll store a JSON structure that maps to whatever you set the settings up to be. So it's going to load those from the file system. This ribbon icon EL is that dice that we saw on the side. Notice when we clicked it, it says, hey, pop up a new notice. It says this is a notice. And in this case, we added a class to it, which is just a built-in Obsidian class. Actually, sorry, that's not a built-in Obsidian one. I didn't think it had a style, but maybe it does have a style. But this is essentially the way you can add styles, and there will be a style.css file that goes with it. I didn't show you the status bar, but there is a status bar at the bottom, and it just said, hey, set the status bar text to status bar text. And then it shows you how to add a few commands. In this case, we're doing an add command. This will run from anywhere, and it's just going to pop up a modal. Another add command. In this case, this is an editor callback one. This is the one I was talking about before. It's only going to show up if you're in an edit mode and on a markdown file. Here's another command. In this case, it's a check callback, and there is actually an editor check callback as well. This is a slightly weird API, but essentially what it does is you provide it one function. It's going to provide you a Boolean, and you check to see if it's checking. If it's checking, all you do is say, well, here's the logic I need to run to say if you should show this command or not. If it's not checking, then you actually execute the command that you want it to do. Not a huge fan of that, but that's the API they have. So in this case, it's like, hey, if markdown view and not checking, then do this. Show the modal and then return true. So this add settings tab is essentially why there is a entry in the settings for this plugin. It's essentially saying, hey, I do have settings, and this new sample settings tab is going to be the UI that's going to show for those settings. In this case, it's this sample settings tab object. And you can see here in the display method for this object, they're doing that programmatic build out of the DOM. So it's essentially, hey, grab a container EL, make it empty, and then add a new setting. Set its name, set its description, add a text field, add a placeholder for it. What is the value? The value is our plugin settings, my setting parameter, and then you hook up an onChange to it, and that onChange essentially says, oh, well, I've got to go set the value for that parameter, and then I have to save the settings, and that's essentially going to write the data out to cache and eventually to disk. So this is the paradigm that they want to use, or this is the paradigm you would use without using Svelte, and I'm not a huge fan of that. So, especially if you have a somewhat complex settings UI. The other, and then here's that sample modal that they were using that pops up. In this case, we're extending their modal. You have an open, you have a close, and that's kind of how you can build those out. You can also use Svelte in these cases as well. I don't do that in this plugin because I do use a modal, but I didn't use Svelte in this. But in this case, you could essentially get the EL and then use that as the base, as the EL that you initiate or you instantiate Svelte to do its stuff on. Okay, so for some reason we lost video and sound for a few minutes here, so I'm going to do a voiceover. Here I'm talking about a few more methods on the plugin object that we can override or essentially provide implementations for. Save settings. That's essentially going to save the data to disk for your settings. This load settings implementation here is essentially loading data from the data.json if it exists. If it doesn't, then go ahead and use the default settings object that we have in types.ts to provide the default settings for a new user. On unload is a method you'll want to override and provide essentially if you instantiate anything in your plugin that needs to be cleaned up. If the user turns off your plugin, this is where you would do it. And then here's an example of how you can register DOM events. This is part of the sample plugin. It's essentially doing a console.log anytime the user clicks anywhere in the in Obsidian. And I believe I'll switch over to Obsidian here and to give you an example. Yes, I'm going to open up the developer plugins the developer tools that are available inside Electron and Obsidian and kind of show you how it's logging all the pointer clicks. There's also a register interval that you'll need to use if you do any kind of set interval inside of your plugin. So here we are finishing up, we went through step one, we got the sample plugin repo created, we linked it up to a test vault, and then we stepped through the different things that the sample plugin is providing, showing you where they're at in Obsidian. And now we're going to walk through how to essentially use Svelte and get it set up to use it to build our settings. Here we're showing the npm install command that you need to run to save the dev, save the dependencies required. You need to update tsconfig.json file so that way Typescript knows how to compile Typescript inside of Svelte files, inside the script box, or excuse me, the script block. And then you need to turn inline source map, turn on inline source map. Here we're going to update esbuild.config to also pre-process and build, compile Svelte files. Since we're adding that plugin to the esbuild context. All right, so we're going to convert our settings to use Svelte. Doing this, we're going to essentially pull the types out of main.ts into a types.ts file. We're going to create a Svelte store in settings.store.ts, which is probably the most important part of this. And then we're going to create our base settings component .svelte file and then hook that up in main.ts. So here's the types.ts file where we extracted out the settings into it. essentially the interface for our settings and the default settings. And then here's the settings store for the Svelte store. So this is essentially a singleton. In this case, we're exporting a settings variable, which is really a Svelte writable on top of the Obsidian distiller settings object. And then we're going to export an init function, and that will essentially require you to pass in the reference to the plugin. If the settings are already instantiated, then we'll just return. Otherwise, we're going to pull the subscribe, set, and update methods out of a writable, out of a Svelte writable on top of the plugin.settings object that we're wanting to have this store sit on top of. And then we're going to update that set method, so that way anytime a value for the settings is, or anytime the settings value is essentially changed, we'll set the value of the settings, and then we're going to essentially call plugin.saveSettings, so that way it automatically saves the changes to data.json. So that way we don't have to worry about the dot on change events that we were seeing in the programmatic way of building out the settings UI. All right, so now we're going to go take a look at that base settings component.svelte file, which will contain our settings. And this is a pretty standard Svelte component. We have a script block. We're exporting an app prop, which is a reference to Obsidian application, which will need to be passed in. And then we have a header here, a step 2 header, just to help us know which step we're on. And then here we're wrapping our settings in this setting item component. And this is essentially just a way for us to make sure that we're mapping to the same HTML structure that Obsidian uses whenever you use its programmatic settings components. You can take advantage of all the theming that all the different themes people write, etc. So essentially, this is just a wrapper around that with some slots for the name, description, and control. And here you can see I'm setting, and then I'm passing a slot of name. In this case, it's going to be Svelte setting number 1 in the vault. And then I'm using the app that was passed in to get the vault name. Description, it's a Svelte secret. And then in this case, I added a placeholder of Svelte. So pretty much kind of the same thing. Now here's the secret sauce to using the store. Now instead of doing that, the value is this dot whatever, and on change this dot. Now I just say, hey, $ settings. So this is essentially dereferencing my settings. Because if you looked at settings without that $, it would be an object with a subscribe method and a set method, etc. This $ is Svelte's way of saying, no, I want the actual thing underneath it. So it's like, oh, you want the object that I'm sitting on top of, and oh, that has a my setting. So I've dereferenced it, and I'm just saying, hey, bind to that. So if there's something there, that's what you show in the input, and if they change it, you write it back out to it. So now this is all we have to do to have a setting that updates itself. Now, the only change that we made in the settings, and I think I actually have both code in here. So down here is the original code where the display is. It's doing all the programmatic DOM building. Now what we're doing is we're saying, hey, I have a view. It's a Svelte component that's pulled in from Svelte. I'm calling this init method, which is from the settings store, to essentially says initialize my store if it isn't already. And then on the display, I still get the container EL. I make it an empty one. And now I say, hey, view, you're a new settings component, which is the component I just built. Where do I go? I go into that container EL that was just created. And here's the props I'm passing in, which is that app dot, the reference to this app. In hide, I call super.hide, and then I do this.view $destroy to tell Svelte, hey, go clean up the things we just made. So now, if I go over to the build tab and I Z step 2, and clear this up a little bit, and now I'm going to run a PM. I'm going to run build. It copied everything over. If I get here, I don't think I got here fast enough for us to see. Hopefully in the top right, there was a little notice that said hot reload, reloaded the Obsidian plugin, but we'll find out if it didn't. All right, it didn't. I don't know why it didn't. Oh, I know exactly why it didn't. I fought with this earlier today. So if I go back to this plugin linked, I go in here, it's like, oh, there's these 3 files. Why isn't it uploading? They were just updated. I bet if I run this, it'll tell me they were just updated. Yeah, they were just updated. I have to have hot reload will only work if the directory that's watching has a .git directory. There's no .git or a .hot reload empty file. So, see, I learned that earlier today. So now, if I go back here, I'll do it fast enough. Do that, and then go to that. And you see it in the top right. It's like, hey, sample plugin has been reloaded. This is interesting, though, because this is not the normal flow here, because this is not called sample plugin anymore. This will be the only time we do this. If I refresh this, wait, we have a sample plugin and we have an Obsidian distiller plugin. What's going on? This is something to do with them. But now we have an Obsidian distiller plugin. I changed the manifest name. It's our plugin. We're good to go. If we go to the configurations, we can see we're on step 2. Svelte setting 1. Great. Yeah, it's a Svelte secret. And in this case, if I go change this to test, close it, open it back up. Hey, it's test. And if we go back to this directory, was it here where I did a list? There's only a main, a manifest, and a style. Now there's a data.json. It wrote out our data, and there it is. So that's how it's essentially keeping track of your settings. So Obsidian doesn't have any kind of backing database like Notion or anything like that, but about a quarter of the plugins built probably try to build a database off of a file system. So yeah, I even do it in my plugin. But yeah, so that's essentially how you're going to store data. We added Svelte, so now we can kind of move on to some more challenging steps. So now we're going to go update our settings to map to the application we actually want to build. We need to know what header in the document that you want us to distill is the highlight, are the highlights under. Where do we put the output? So what heading should we put the output under? What's our open API key? And what prompt do you want me to send to open API along with the highlights that I collected? So those are the settings we're going to build out. So let me go, I'll just show you the code. All right. Nope. So what we updated was mainly just this file here. And it's exactly what you would think it would be. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I like using Svelte in this. It's just HTML. I need a highlights location, I add a description, and then here's an input, and it's mapping to this new, so that's one thing I can show, sorry. I updated my interface. Now I have 4 string keys in here, and here's some defaults. In this case, I want my highlights heading to default to highlights. I want my output heading to default to ChatGPT. No default for the open API key. And then here's the OpenAI prompt that I want to default to. It does have a template variable in there, which we will have to process ourselves. So we'll just process it, look for that, put the actual title of the note. In my case, I know that the note title is actually the note of the book, so that kind of makes it easier, but I'm making some assumptions here, and then pass that in. So we didn't have to change anything to the settings store because it's just going to sit on top of the object and update whatever is there. And then, like I said, we updated the settings component, and we're just kind of doing the same thing over and over here. I did change this a little, so I did update this component. I added a prop that says item control width, just so that way the text area with the, if it's passed in, it's going to default to inherit, but if it's passed in, it will essentially say, hey, set the width to whatever was passed in. Then, the other things that changed, so I can show you this real quick, those changes real quick, so let me go ahead and step 3, and then go ahead and run the build, and then go back to there. Now, that's interesting. I would have expected this to blank out. So something, I don't know why it's doing this. I did something that's making this weird. So now it's updated. This was all working fine earlier. But now, no, it's not. What is going on? I'm going to turn it off. Update it. Turn it back on. All right, so now it updated. I'm not sure if it's because I'm changing the manifest in between each one. I just wanted it to be obvious what we were working on. But in this case, we have our new settings UI. It's, as I said, defaulting to highlights, defaulting to ChatGPT, and here's the default prompt. The only thing I have to put in is the OpenAI API key. I'll do that in the next step just because we're not going to use it right now. The next thing I do want to do is go over a couple of things. One, we're going to build out 2 commands. One command will be the editor command, which it's already built in mine. I'll show you the code in a minute. So in this case, if I type distiller, that's interesting. That one's in there. It does nothing. Am I not in edit mode? Is that what was going on? Yeah, I was not in edit mode, so this one wasn't showing up. In this case, I'm saying, hey, I want to distill the current note if it's a markdown note, right? So that's what we're doing. And then the other one is, now we have this context menu, file context menu command that we can say, hey, go ahead and distill this note. All right, so I'll show you the code for those. You've kind of already seen it. It's not doing a ton of things different, but in main.ts, we are adding a little bit. So this is the one where it's like, hey, this is a command that does nothing. So really glad that that one's there. In this case, this is, hey, I need you to register an event. And that event is on this.app.workspace.onFile menu. So that's the context menu that we wanted. It's going to pass me a menu and a file. In this case, I'm going to say menu add item. In this case, I'm using essentially their programmatic DOM builder here to essentially say, set the title to this, set the icon to this, and then on click, I need you to do a couple of things. One, I need you to assert that the file is not null, which it generally is not going to be, but just do it. And then I need you to call this node distiller.still, pass in the app, the file, and the settings, and that's something that I created here. In this case, the distill is going to essentially say, hey, I need you to go find the end and the beginning of the headings. Excuse me, of the highlights heading section. This is also this is some of the more complex code in here as well, but it's not that complex. But just know that it's, Obsidian has a file cache, right? So it's essentially saying, hey, in this file, I want you to go find what you have in the cache, assert it's not null, and then clean heading. I passed in the highlight heading from the settings. From experience, I learned that people, even if I say, no matter how clear you can try to make a UI, they're thinking markdown heading. You want me to give you the pound heading. No, I don't. I want you to just give me the name of it. So in this case, I'm just stripping any of the pound signs that I find. Hopefully they don't have pound space, some name with a pound in it, because then it's going to get stripped. But I don't think my code's that smart. Maybe it is. I can't remember. So now I need you to, hey, Cache, I need you to give me the headings that you have. So Obsidian's cache has several things in it. I can't remember exactly what they are, but there's like front matter data, headings, et cetera. And it's supposed to give you a way to kind of chop the document up and go, oh, I need to go find this and go to that section somewhat quickly. Assert that cache headings is not null. This is the other thing that's slightly annoying about the API, is it's a lot of, it's this or null. And it's like, okay, but now I have to like constantly do all these checks, which I guess makes sense in some cases. So in this case, I'm going to go, hey, did you find the heading in there? Great. If you did, I'm glad you found it. You found the heading. I need to know what the next heading is. So in this case, it's like, I found the highlights. What's the next heading? Then it tells me what the next heading is. It's like, okay, here's all the content that's highlights. That's what I'm going to use. So that's essentially what this code is doing. If it doesn't find the, it also finds the, it's finding the append line as well. So where I can't remember if this is used or not. Oh, it is. This is used when we're trying to write out, but it's not used in this case. Where do I need to write the data? Because eventually I'll send in, well, here's the output heading. Where do I need to write the data? Now, the more interesting piece is hey, if there's not, then I'm going to throw an error, heading not found, and then I'm going to catch that error, and I'm going to essentially put out a notice that says, hey, I couldn't find the heading that you configured. So that's essentially what that code is doing. Once I have the highlight lines, which I'm returning, I open the file data, I split the data by new lines, and then I'm creating essentially the highlight data, which is slice it between that first line and that last line that I returned. And then in this case, I'm just going to pop up a modal that says, hey, here's the data we found. So the command actually does something. And I think that is what we're doing from the file menu. And remember, from the file menu, all we know is that they're doing something on a file. I don't know if the file's open anywhere. I don't know if it's in editor mode. All I know is they gave me a file. I need to try and go distill it. This command, which does an editor's callback, is the command that says, you're in a markdown file and it's in edit mode. Here's the editor and the context you want. In this case, go ahead and distill it. And I'm still passing in the file here. In the next version, I will not be passing in the file. I'll actually be using the editor. But in this case, it's doing the exact same thing that the other one was doing. So now if I go run it, so if I run it on this one, if I just say essentialism, I think that was this one, distill it, we get this modal with, essentially, hey, here's all the data that we were going to send. And if I do it from here as well, not the one that does nothing, then same thing, right? Okay, so we've got the skeleton of a semi-useful app now. We've got all the UI elements in place. We know that we can store our settings and save them, et cetera. We're ready to kind of move on to our final step here. Here's some of the code we went over, showing the context menu. We tested using our settings. We saw that it's actually knows what highlights we're looking for, et cetera. So now we're moving on to step 4, and in step 4, there's really only one thing we need to do. Two things we need to do, but we need to make a call to OpenAI's API, wait several seconds because it takes forever, and then write out the response. All right, so let's do that real quick. And as I said, the code I'm using, I'm just going to bring it up real quick because I want to give this person attribution for sure. So this quick add plugin is actually pretty cool. It allows you to do a lot of different ways of adding quick notes to your vault. But this person was definitely doing some stuff with OpenAI. I found it, and I was like, hey, I can use this. I'm going to use it. I'm not using all these files. I condensed it all down to, because I don't care about a lot of the settings that he's allowing you to set. So it's definitely stole from there. Okay, so yeah, we want to go here, go to 4, open up. Okay, no, don't update my plugins. So here, I added an OpenAI, and we just have an OpenAI request. I'm only using one model in this case, which is GTP, whatever the latest preview model is. I forget what it's called. Here's the response, essentially a type for the response that they're going to send back. Very odd. You have to dig kind of deep down into find the data you actually look for. In this case, doing a token count, that's really, I don't know if, for LLM, when you send in a token, it's not a word. It's like whatever boundary they have. And it could be one letter, it could be half a word. It's usually, I think the average is like 3/4 of a word as a token, if you kind of average it out. In this case, I'm doing a count to say, hey, after we encoded all the stuff you tried to send with this prompt, is it even going to fit within their token size? The latest models is like, it's huge. You can fit hundreds of pages in it. So we're not going to run into that. But it could, if you had a lot of highlights, it could be a problem. And then here's this OpenAI request where it's like, hey, I want to need the API key. Here's the system prompt. So essentially, like the prompt that's just saying, hey, what is your personality? In this case, I'm saying I want this machine to be a helpful assistant that provides thorough summaries. And then, so you get this OpenAI request, and you say, okay, make request with the prompt. And the prompt is the big, long thing that we put in our settings with the highlights. Here it is. So 128,000 tokens is what this one can do. If we go over that, we throw up an error. We call, the Obsidian API has this request URL interface. I don't know if this is a Electron. I don't think it's an Electron thing. I think it's their abstraction on top of whatever Electron provides. It's like fetch, but essentially you could do post, gets, whatever in here. But yeah, we're calling Open API. We're doing a post. We're passing in the header with our API key. We're passing in we're stringifying the body with the model. Temperature, these are all defaults that could be changed. I forget what each one of them stands for, but essentially I'm going middle of the road. I don't want it to be too crazy. I don't want it to be too strict. And then the messages. I'm passing in, hey, here's the system prompt. Remember, you're good at doing thorough summaries, and then here's the prompt. Then we essentially wait for the response, then we return the response. This is very simple, straight API code. If we look at Note Distiller, how it is actually calling it now. So we do the same things we're doing. For if I execute this from a file menu context, don't know if the file's open, it's going to do everything we talked about it was doing. It's going to get the prompt template from our settings. It's going to replace anywhere it finds this note title with the name of the file. Like I said, I'm assuming that the name of the file is the book that you care about. And to be quite frank, this is not a plugin that I'd probably publish. This is just one I built for myself, right? That's kind of the point of this, is you can build your own tools pretty easily. And then take the prompt, append on the highlighted data, and then open a modal that says, hey, I'm distilling the note. Please be patient, because it takes so long that you want them to know that it's taking a long time. Open the modal and then call the AI response. I'll wait for it. Once it's done, I'll close the modal. I'll take the Response choices 0. There's no error checking here, just by the way. So yeah, there's probably more stuff that needs to happen around this, but I'm assuming you sent me a great response. I'm going to go get the very first thing you gave me, and I'm going to just put the content out there. In this case, we're going to do output lines, and this is where I'm calling back into that get ending and beginning with the output heading, so that way I know where I need to start appending after the header. And then this utility.write, it will wrap Obsidian's API, and essentially in this case, this could probably actually be a read cached. No. So the documentation says if you're not going to change the file, you can do a read cached. But if you plan on reading it and changing it, do a read. So we do a read, split out everything based on the sections I already know about. So that way, like, here's the stuff before where I want to write, here's where I want to write, here's the stuff that was after I want to write. And then call into Obsidian's modify API, which is essentially says, hey, here's a file, here's the text I want you to do. It tries to give you some protections around maybe the file changed, but I'm not sure how well that works, but essentially this is the way you're going to change that file behind the scenes, not in an editor. Okay, then we need to go back and show the version of the still editor. So this is I'm in the editor. I'm going to set my cursor, have my cursor sitting somewhere, and I'm going to run this command via the command palette. We're doing a lot of same code here. I probably could have put this in some shared code, but I didn't. So here I'm getting the line. I'm getting the editor because again, now I'm running a command and they have an open editor, and it's like I need you to know that this is going to take a while. So this is there's a better way of doing this that I found, but I wasn't going to go change the code at the last minute. But I get the cursor, I get the line, I do the same prompt. I have some waiting texts here. I'm going to create an interval. I thought I updated this. I didn't. It's going to work, but this should technically, I know where I updated it in another, okay. This should have, I should have had a reference to my plugin in this code, and it should be calling plugin.registerInterval. So that way I can tell it about it. It's still going to work, but there are some intervals, like I tried to do some other stuff, and it would just lock up and not work, and that was before I noticed it's like, oh yeah, there's this register interval thing, which makes sense given that they're trying to control the loop behind the scenes. In this case, it's just going to be outputting some of these lines, right? Hey, wait. It's seriously, you need to just wait a little bit longer. Then I get the response. I clear the interval. I write out, or I get the data I want to write out. And in this case, I just say editor.setLine, write the info out, rather than having to do all that file chunking, etc. Still have the modal around for showing if you do the file. So let's go do this real quick. So there's the code. It's actually pretty straightforward. So we're going to go ahead and do this one. I do need to update my settings real quick. Let me do that. There we go. This screen recorder I'm using makes the screen I'm looking at over here super dark, and I can't control it. So that's not good. So I put in the Open API key, so we should be all good on our settings. And then I'm using the defaults because that's what mine are. I got my highlights, which we know worked, and in this case, I got a ChatGPT header. So let's do it. So let's do this one first. So distill. Yep, I want you to do this one. So run it. No, what did I do? Oh, I didn't build it. Never mind. Yeah, this is what happens when you have multiple versions. So go to build. The step. Oh Lord. Step 4. Okay, clear this. PM run build. Go back over here. I'd like to. Okay, it says it hot reloaded it, but I don't actually believe it. That's still in there. What does this say? I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off, reload it. It says 4 there now. I bet if I look at this will say step 4, everything's good there. And now if I do p distill, yeah, now there's only one command because I removed this command does nothing, because why do you need a command that does nothing at this point? We run this, we should get some messages saying, hey, just give it I don't know, a minute maybe.
For Obsidian plugins to just like modify your the thing that's
yeah, I mean it's code mirror underneath, so there are some that will like have several things where it's building out your editor or modifying the layout and stuff like that. This is the first one I've ever done it. Okay, so it finished. It gave me this, I'm sure, an amazing summary. Actually, this one, the latest model is actually pretty good. Like the earlier ones were like, yeah, I should have done it myself. But it gave me a summary of my highlights, right? That's pretty cool. And I can read through it and say, yeah, if I agree with it, I don't. So we did the editor one. Let me go and make sure that this one's cleaned up. By the way, this is an amazing book if you've never heard of it. So in this case, I was using distilled, but I'm actually, I know I kept that because I wanted to see how different they were. Because I ran it twice one time, and the first paragraphs were almost identical, but then after that, it was totally different. So in this case, what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to close this one because we don't need it. I'm going to say, hey, distill the note. And in this case, it opens up a modal because I don't have an editor, to mess with, and we'll sit here and watch a modal, sit there for a few minutes. But to talk about this book, How to Be Miserable, the premise of the book is it's like 40 things on how to be miserable. And it's supposed to be like, it's like, hey, no, really, you want to do the reverse of what I'm telling you? But it's just a very interesting way of reading it. It's like, oh, yeah, I do that one. That's why I'm miserable. I do that one. That's why I'm miserable. Yeah.
just eyeballing the notes that are in here. Is building a second brain? Is that basically how to use Obsidian?
No, it's part of the whole PKM kind of thing where it's just like, because that person, the modal went away. It's not the best success message, but I assume that's what the success message was. So I think if we go down here to the chat GPT, we should see that it distilled it once again. Yep. So that's the way you can do this. I was doing this mostly because I collected all these highlights and I was doing the right thing, which is go back and read your highlights and distill them yourself. And then the guy who wrote the Second Brain book was like, hey, here's an awesome prompt you can send, and it'll distill your notes for you. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a cool idea. I'd like to try that. And that was where, when I talked to Nick about he was looking for somebody, I was like, oh, I could use this as an example plugin. So it's an interesting thing. So the highlights are taken from my Kindle. So when I highlight them, and I use a service called Readwise, which will read. So Readwise is awesome because it also has a browser plugin where you can like highlight things, or you can save documents and highlight, and then it'll save all your highlights for books, articles, whatever. The thing that I really like about it, and Stephen, I know you and I about, 15 years ago, it was a long time ago, you wrote an app that kind of tried to remind you of notes that you took or things that your kids did, and it used an algorithm based on how often you should see things, so that way you can remember them, et cetera. It's odd that you don't remember that I remember it, because I don't have a good memory.
I must have missed my space repetition.
Exactly, space repetition. Readwise also has, we'll essentially send you a daily thing that says, hey, here's highlights you should go review. It's pretty cool. But that's where essentially the highlights were from the books as I read them, and then Readwise syncs this note into the vault. All right, so a few follow-on topics that I'm not going to go into, but are clearly covered in the documentation that Obsidian provides is they have developer policies. If you make a network, like the fact that we were making a network call out, they want you to essentially have that in your README, or let the users know you are doing stuff under the covers. You can't have any kind of any metrics gathering. They don't want you to collect people's information, et cetera. It also goes over how to deploy and also list your plugin in that market. The deployment's pretty nice in the sense of they show you here's a Git action you can run. Whenever you build a tag, it will build out those 3 files you need, and that is essentially what once your plugin gets into their market, they will go look for updates there and update your plugin. To get your plugin listed, I have one plugin listed. It's called Obsidian Clipper. It just collects things, essentially clippings from the web. So if I have, it will build a bookmarklet that you can drag to your browser, or you can right-click in another view to save to a shortcut, however you want to use it, but essentially allowing you to highlight things and get it into your vault, configured properly, et cetera. It has a few more niceties than that, but yeah, that you essentially validate that you can, does it work on mobile? Does it work on Linux? Does it work on Windows? Do all this, go through these tests, do check marks, put in a PR against their repo, and then wait months, because they have some automated checks, but then they go through and they're checking them just because they're trying to keep their landscape and their tool set clean of people doing kind of nasty things. So, but it does take a little bit of time for them to review it and get it through. Local LLMs, I could easily go pull down via Ollama or Hugging Face or how llama.cpp, however you want to run a local LLM. You could run one locally and then have a web interface or an API sitting on top of that and do this all locally. I played around. I went down a rabbit hole. The reason why I went down a rabbit hole, I was running everything locally. I was building tokens for all my nodes, getting them into a vector database, and then running all this code to say, hey, I need you to go tell me. I want to search. I want to be able to search through this stuff and have it kind of do off my nodes, right? I haven't had great success. I think I'm going to have to break down and go use the Python version of LangChain because the JS one's a little bit behind, but it's pretty amazing. I was able to get something up and running like in a day to where it's like it has my notes. I can tell they're in there. It's just not very good at giving me information back. Like I can tell that I sent it stuff, and also the vector databases. I also looked in there and like there were documents with just like one character of like a greater than sign. I'm like, what? That's not useful. So me doing the embeddings was messing something up. But it's also an interesting thing that could be looked at.
You're saying that Obsidian plugins can't have any dependencies like in their node modules?
Yeah, to be able to be in the community, so that yes, but there are tons of plugins where it's like, no, this is just a Git repo. You're gonna have some knowledge on, oh, I have to install Node, I have to do this. There's one I use that's literally go suck all the things that I've done in the to-do app out of their SQLite database and stuff them into into nodes and stuff. So that's kind of the thing that I did submit this talk. Well, this is the first iteration of this talk to KCDC, but one of the things I really like about Obsidian, and it's actually one of the things that it's kind of the same along the lines why I started using NeoVim after bashing Vim for years and giving this dude a lot of trouble. But yeah, it was because once they moved over to, at least NeoVim's always used Lua. Once they used Lua, or I don't know if they always use Lua, but once they moved to Lua, I was like, wait, this is something I can like actually use to make this what I want it to be. And this is the same thing. You can take Obsidian, it's just TypeScript under the covers. You can go build anything you think of. I have tons of plugins. I don't have tons. I have like 4 or 5 plugins that I use that I created. They will never be pushed, that just use my processes of how, doing things. It has I said that, everybody it doesn't have a database, but everybody seems to be building a plugin that acts like a database. Like it has this plugin called DataView. It's crazy. It's awesome. You can write essentially queries against your documents and then build out, like I'll show you real quick. I'll open up my personal personal vault. Oh, it went over here. God. So one of the things, so I have daily notes that I keep. This is a template. It'll generate. This is a plugin that will just generate the daily note. But this is a data view where it's like, hey, I want to know all the files that were changed or created or touched today. It's like essentially table. This is like the SQL version of it, but there is a JS version of it too. So this is just things you can do where it's like, yeah, go find those things. But one of the other things I do is that I use my plugin for is a weekly review, and these are all data views. But like if you look at one of my daily ones, the YAML up here, I'm trying to remember my weight. But essentially, I'm like, hey, how was I feeling? What was my weight? Because aren't we all trying to lose weight? Did I exercise? This doesn't get checked very often, which is probably why this doesn't go down very much. Any kind of tag, this is a daily, and then the sleep score from my bed because it tells me how well I slept. Obviously, I was in a bad mood because I slept like crap. But then the weekly kind of just aggregates it, right? So it's like, hey, did you exercise? Oh, look at all those X's. Not great. But then you can build out charts. Hey, how was I feeling for the week? Where did my weight go? Luckily, nowhere. And then some finances, all files for the week. And then this is part of my Clipper. These are like things that I clipped, and did I go back and review them? I actually haven't gone back and reviewed them and stuff. And then it'll keep track of the ones that after I've reviewed them, etc. And one of the things, so in this case, what this does is this will go back to the note. The way my Clipper works is, so if I show you, this is a beta version of the Clipper. So if you installed the version out there right now, it's just, you would see a UI that looks like this. It's just, you have a Clipper that can go to your daily log. You're going to tell me what header you want it under, etc. And you could do topic notes, which in my case, like a topic note is, this note is about this topic. I need to be able to clip to it. So like LLMs, I'll just clip things I find into it. This is where you get you could drag this link to your browser bar. That's going to build out to tell that bookmark that, hey, it's this vault. And then it's actually this data. Here's the highlighted data. Here's some other things. You can modify some of the headings just so that way it makes it easier for me to find it. And then you could build a Chrome extension. This actually does call out to a web service I have that's like, take this bookmark, wrap it up in a Chrome extension and bring it back because people wanted Chrome extensions. If I click on it, it should work. Then boom, there it is. You click that, it's going to download the Chrome extension. And then this advanced section. So I want my clippings to actually be stored in a file per domain. And then where's that actually at? That's the type ahead stuff that I have. And then this one is experimental in the sense of, do you want the bookmarklet to actually pop up a modal that says, do you have a comment about this highlight? I don't actually use that. Somebody asked for that, and I thought it was a good idea, so I added it. But this is what it looks like. But now what's changed is you can have multiple. So like you can see here, I have this goes to my daily file, this goes to my daily file, but they're different headers under there. So that way I can have, oh, this is specific to Arbol, I want to clip to that. This is this one's actually used by a shortcut, not the browser. So I just put it in iOS shortcut so I can say, hey, I spent this at X, and it sticks it in there. And then this is a topic one. And a topic one, like I said, is just like, this is going to this specific file. Which is pretty, I don't know. I've been doing this for about a year and a half now, and just, it's mostly about what my needs are, but There's a somewhat active community that will ask for things or stuff, and so I go in and we'll add things. But this is going to be a pretty big change, so I'm interested to see if people like it or not. And like I said, so if I show you if I get rid of this and then go under that resources and then clippings directory, you're just going to see a bunch of files in here with mostly domain names. And it's like, oh, here's all the clippings that I've clipped over time from docs.aws. And when it puts it in the daily file, so if we look at daily, did I clip anything today? I don't think I did. Oh, no, I did. So this is actually an embedding. So if you look, there's like a little link here. It's just going to go to that file. It's just like saying, hey, you're really just embedding this header, whatever's under this header, in that file. Oops, whatever. But yeah. So it's pretty interesting what you can do with Obsidian. Any questions? That's kind of all I had.
So the way to build out your UIs where you're using Svelte, is that
Yep.
Is that Obsidian's recommendation that if you're going to be using UI,
It's not.
Svelte, or you just that's your preferred method of building UIs?
Yeah. So when I was digging into this, and I realized that my settings were going to get more interesting. Oh my gosh, I can't see. I don't know why. Obsidian.md. If you look at the docs and you look at user interface, they're going to give you. Oh, did they get rid of it? Oh, maybe it's under getting started. Okay. The docs, they'll say, hey, there's a lot of people who build it out with a React, which is like, you really want to shoot yourself if you want to build out plugins with React. And then, or Svelte. So I saw this, I looked at Svelte, I was like, oh, this looks like, I do not like React. It's not my style. But when I looked at Svelte, I was like, oh, there's code here, there's HTML here,
But that's why
I'll do this. Yeah.
But like Svelte must be a dependency that's available from Obsidian, so you didn't have to like throw that into your.
Well, no. So you go and so essentially what's happening, and also Svelte is essentially it's a compiler, right? Yeah. So yeah, it just compiles it into that main.js. So at the end of the day, I'm not the runtime. There's no dependency on Svelte. It's just like here's the yeah. But like I said, when I started, this was not here. There was some third-party person who kind of was maintaining the docs, and you just dug into their API their literal type doc and say, I don't know how to do this, and go look at other people's plugins. And I was like, oh, this person, their settings look way different than mine, and they have HTML. And I was like, oh, they're using Svelte. So I was like, oh, I want to do that. I don't want to do the other way. But they are adding more user interface things that may make it more interesting to use their built-in way. Because like I said, I have a type ahead suggester that's going to, and I had to build that rather than just using their built-in one that they eventually added. Yes?
You can update your Svelte stores to the new Svelte release?
I haven't even looked at it yet. I don't know. Probably not. Mostly because the way it's working now, and like
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
it is, and it's weird because it's not. It's like I'm not building a Svelte application, so in this case, it's like I just want you to kind of do your thing and get out of the way. So I probably won't. And I didn't. All I did was saw all the drama on Twitter. I don't even know. It was interesting, or X, or whatever it's called. It was, yeah. But, and I don't. The funny thing is, I don't know enough about the other frameworks that people were comparing it to know if I just like whatever. That's what happens when you get old. A decade ago, I would have been all over it, but now it's just like, ugh. Well, I bet if I ticked those exercise boxes more, I'd have a little bit different attitude about that. Any other questions? Cool. Well, thanks a lot for coming out, and you can always find me online if you have a question.
Thanks, John. You should definitely check out his plugin too. Clipper is a lot of work's gone into it. It's really cool, and it does a lot. He's talking about everything. It had TypeScript, it had Vim, it had Obsidian.
That's why you invited me. You knew I was going to tick all your boxes.
So yeah, thank
A
you.
little bit of React bashing.